All right, so um, are you ready to explore the most incredible machine, you'll ever encounter?
Mm.
Your own body. We're going to be diving deep, deep into human anatomy and physiology today, and we're using this pretty hefty college-level textbook called The Human Body. But don't worry, we're not going full-on med school here.
Right, not at all.
We're aiming for those aha moments,
Yeah.
the ones that make you see yourselves in a whole new light.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we just like take our bodies for granted every single day, Even just a little understanding of how these crazy intricate systems work all together, well, it can totally change your perspective on health, well-being, everything, really.
For sure. So this textbook, it starts pretty basic, laying down the body's organizational levels. Like we all get that we're, well, an organism, right? But we're also this collection of organ systems, each doing its own, it's like, very specific job. They've even got this diagram here showing all 11 systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that visual is really helpful. But the real magic,
Yeah.
it's not about memorizing a parts list. It's like seeing how all these systems, as different as they seem on the surface, they're actually in constant conversation, cooperating to keep us going. It's mind-blowing, honestly. More intricate than any machine we've ever even dreamed of.
It's like this perfectly choreographed dance, right?
Yeah.
But the dance floor, well, it's this thing called homeostasis.
Exactly. Balance. It's all about balance. Think of it like your body's got thousands of ideal settings. Temperature, blood pressure, even the tiniest chemical levels in your blood. It's constantly monitoring, adjusting, making sure everything stays in that sweet spot.
Okay, so it's like our inner Goldilocks, right? Always making sure everything is just right. But how does it actually do that? The book mentions something called feedback systems, which, I don't know, sounds kind of
Oh,
ominous.
no, no, they're the opposite of ominous. Negative feedback, yeah, it's got a scary name, but it's a good thing. It's how your body hits the brakes when something's off. Say you stand up too fast. Blood pressure drops for a sec. Your body senses that instantly and kicks in to get it back to normal. Boom, negative feedback.
So, like, our body is doing these micro corrections all the time behind the scenes, stopping us from fainting every time we stand up. That's pretty impressive when you think about it. You mentioned positive feedback too, though. What's the deal with that?
Ah, positive feedback, that's like hitting the gas instead of the brakes. Amplifies the change. Useful sometimes, like childbirth, you need those contractions to escalate, right? But most of the time, those positive feedback loops, they need careful control. Can get out of hand fast if left unchecked.
Okay, powerful, but potentially dangerous.
Oh,
Got it. Now let's get really, really tiny here. The textbook spends a lot of time on cells, which it describes as these like tiny cities. And,
yeah.
well, it's a pretty accurate description.
Totally. They're the fundamental units of life, and just like cities, they've got their specialized structures. Organelles, they're called, each with a specific job to do.
Right, so like the nucleus is like City Hall, holding all the blueprints, the DNA.
Yeah.
And then you've got ribosomes, which are like those tiny factories churning out proteins.
And don't forget those lysosomes, the cleanup crew, breaking down waste, cellular debris, the whole bit, sometimes called suicide packages, because if they release their contents too early, well, it can destroy the whole cell. High stakes cleanup, for sure.
Whoa, intense. It's like they've got this like fail-safe built in to protect the rest of the cell, which is kind of wild. So you've got all these different organelles working together, but how do they know what to build, when? That's where this whole protein synthesis thing comes in, right?
Exactly. Those genetic blueprints we talked about, that's where they come in. Protein synthesis is all about turning those DNA instructions into functional proteins, the real workhorses of the cell.
Right, because proteins do what, like everything. They build. They're messengers. They're the enzymes that make all those reactions happen. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So how does this whole protein synthesis thing work exactly? The book uses words like translation and transcription, which, I don't know, makes it sound way more complicated than it probably is.
Well, it is complex, but think of it like this. You've got this master blueprint locked up tight, right? That's your DNA. Don't want to risk damaging the original, so you make a copy. That's transcription, creating a messenger RNA molecule, or mRNA. That mRNA, it travels out of the nucleus, heads to those ribosomes, the protein factories we talked about, carries the instructions for building that specific protein.
Okay, so the mRNA is like the architect's blueprint, the one that construction workers can actually use. But how do they read it? That's where translation comes in, right?
You got it. Each three-letter sequence on that mRNA, a codon, specifies a particular amino acid. Those are the building blocks of proteins. The ribosome reads those codons, matches them to transfer RNA molecules, tRNA, carrying the right amino acid. It's like this crazy, well-coordinated assembly line happening all the time.
Wow, that's incredible. And this is happening in like trillions of cells constantly to keep us going. Just mind-blowing. And speaking of mind-blowing, what about this plasma membrane? The cells like bouncer.
Ah, yes, the plasma membrane, it's not just a passive barrier, oh no, it's dynamic, this gateway controlling what gets in and out of the cell.
Okay, so more than just a wall, like a high-security checkpoint.
Mm.
But how does it actually work? How does it decide what gets in and what's left out in the cold?
Well, that's where things get really fascinating.
So come on, skillet. How does this cellular bouncer actually work?
Okay, picture this. A whole city bustling, and it's got these skyscrapers, but those are actually proteins scattered everywhere amongst, well, a whole landscape of lipids. And get this, cholesterol, it's like the scaffolding holding it all up, provides stability, keeps everything from just like falling apart.
Wow. Okay, I'm trying to picture this. So not just a solid wall, more like dynamic, always changing. But how do things actually get through all that?
It's all about selective permeability. Some molecules, they're like VIPs right through. Others, they need a little help. And some, well, they're just not getting in.
So it really is like a club with a very discerning doorman then. So who gets the VIP treatment then?
Small stuff, like water molecules, they slip right through these tiny channels in the membrane, no problem.
Makes sense, yeah. But what about the larger molecules? Glucose, for example. They're not fitting through any tiny channels, are they?
Nope. That's where these things called carrier proteins come in, like a ride-sharing service, They escort specific molecules right across.
Okay, molecular Ubers. I like it. But is it always a free ride?
Sometimes. Sometimes you gotta pay up, energy-wise. Think of it like that floating downstream, that's passive transport. Easy, no energy required, just going with the flow from high concentration to low, all about evening things out.
And that's happening all the time inside us.
Oh yeah, constantly. Oxygen into the blood, carbon dioxide out. But sometimes, well, sometimes you need to go against the current, and that takes effort. That's active transport. Cells got to use energy like a gym membership to move those molecules from low to high concentration.
Interesting. Why bother, though? Why not just let everything flow the easy way?
Well, imagine if all the grocery stores were in one tiny part of a city, right? Easy to get groceries there, sure. But what about the folks across town? Sometimes the cell needs a certain concentration in specific places, even if it's not the easy route.
It's like strategically distributing resources, making sure every part of the city, or I guess the cell, has what it needs to function. Okay, we've covered small, we've covered big. What about the really big stuff? Like not just bringing in a grocery bag, but the entire grocery store.
For those mega-sized deliveries, there's endocytosis. Literally means within the cell. It's like, imagine the cell just engulfing something. Forms a little pocket, pinches off, boom, becomes a vesicle inside.
So like a cellular vacuum cleaner.
More like a very, very precise Pac-Man, actually. If it's a liquid, we call it pinocytosis, cell drinking. If it's solid, like a whole bacterium, that's phagocytosis, cell eating. And remember those lysosomes, the suicide packages? They're the ones that break down and recycle whatever the cell just ate.
It's amazing these defense mechanisms all built in, and it's happening at such a tiny level, everywhere, all the time. What about the opposite, though? Getting rid of the waste, the trash.
That's exocytosis, basically reverse endocytosis. How cells get rid of stuff or secrete things like hormones. Think of it like the cell's outgoing mail system.
So we've got incoming deliveries, outgoing mail, internal recycling centers. Our cells are like these bustling cities, constantly at work. This whole conversation is really making me see my body differently.
And this is just scratching the surface. What's really wild is how these seemingly basic processes happening trillions of times a day are behind everything our bodies do.
Like this perfectly orchestrated symphony, but with cells, all happening without us even knowing it?
This deep dive is definitely giving me a newfound appreciation for, well, how complex but also elegant the human body is. It's like our bodies are these, I don't know, incredible self-sustaining ecosystems, constantly adapting, responding to everything around them.
Right, yeah.
It makes you think, even the simplest things like taking a breath or blinking, there's this whole mind-blowingly complex dance of cells and molecules behind it all.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is, We talked about the body in these separate systems, but it's really this seamless web of interactions happening at every single level. So, like, what does this all actually mean for us, the non-scientists, just trying to live our lives in these amazing but kind of confusing bodies?
Well, I think it really underscores, how important it is to respect and care for this incredible machine we've been given. Just understanding the basics can be so empowering, helps us make healthier choices.
It's true. The more you learn about your body, the more you realize how much power we actually have.
Right.
What we eat, how much we sleep, how we deal with stress.
Absolutely.
It all directly impacts this whole symphony of cells and systems.
Yeah, we're active participants in our own well-being, not just along for the ride.
It's so true. It makes all those like health cliches we hear, listen to your body.
Right.
They're not just cheesy slogans anymore. They're reflecting this deep connection we've been talking
Yeah.
about.
Exactly. When we feel stressed, run down, a lot of times that's our body trying to tell us something's off.
Yeah.
Learning to listen to those signals, that's what helps us make choices that support, our overall well-being.
So it's not just about like memorizing anatomy facts. It's about cultivating this sense of, I don't know, awe, I guess, respect for this incredible machine we get to live in.
Exactly. And remember, this is just the very beginning. There's so much more to discover about the human body, New stuff being discovered all the time.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly inspired to keep learning. This deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least. It's like we've been walking around with this universe of complexity inside us all along, and we're just starting to understand it.
That's the beauty of science, isn't it? The more we learn, the more we realize how much more there is to learn. It's this endless journey of curiosity and wonder.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave you with this. Remember that feeling of awe you felt when you first really got at it? How incredible the human body is. Hold on to that feeling.
Yeah.
Let it fuel your curiosity, your desire to learn, because it really is a miracle.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep exploring.